Hi, this is Catherine, and this is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Blood Orange Smoothie, which is an herbal tea made from rooibos and orange. And it's good. Hey, if you're trying to keep off dessert, it's not the worst substitute. So today I'm doing a tea in history. And normally when I do tea in history, I'm reviewing books that I read recently. Either nonfiction history books or historical novels. And I'm not really doing that today. I'm doing something that may become a new segment. We'll see. I call it Two Minds. And it doesn't refer to two different people. It really refers to myself and how sometimes when I'm reading different opinions on the same historical figure, my own opinion gets swayed in favor of the writer. And I don't necessarily like that. I would prefer to feel one way about a person. I'm not talking about when you're reading a biography, for instance, of a king, president, ruler, and you could see some of their accomplishments, and then you could see things that they did that were blatantly wrong, and then you could see other things that were just ambiguous, whatever, tragedies in their life, etc. So it's not like I feel either way about that person. I just maybe find them interesting as a person. And then there are people who really tend to have polarizing reactions from people. And I'm not going to say that every segment I do is going to be about these particular people, but they are the strongest examples. Historical figures that a person either feels that this person was a good person or a messed up person. One of the examples that I can think of right away that people tend to have strong feelings about when they're interested in history, is Richard III. There are societies that defend him. He was never, he was never the one who killed the princess in the tower. He was right in taking his place as king. He's been maligned in so many ways, And then there are people who said he usurped, he was the worst, he was a murderer, and he wanted to be incestuous, and whatever. I tend to think of him in the more favorable light, but I have been sometimes swayed in other directions too. But I'm not talking about him today. I may talk about him in the future, but I don't know. Depends on what I'm thinking at the moment. But I'm going to talk about someone who date-wise is kind of significant because on the 19th of May, 1536, the first incident of a Queen of England being executed took place. I'm talking about, to my memory, there may have been queens that met sad ends pre-Norman times. I'm not an expert on that. We're not going there yet. But I'm talking about the famous or the infamous Anne Boleyn. Well, I can't say her name apparently. At the time of her existence, the time she was alive and even afterwards, some people did not agree on the spelling of her name. Back in those days, spelling was not very important. As someone who's a bit of a spelling nerd, it's kind of hard to understand. But there's a lot we don't know about Anne Boleyn, besides the fact that her spelling now is one way, but back then had all kinds of different variations. We don't know when she was born. I'm not even talking about the date. Like William Shakespeare, we know he was born, okay, I'm seeing if I remember, I think it's 1564, but I'm not gonna, sign away my life to that fact. And we are pretty sure it was in the month of April. It would appear it could have been April 23rd because he was baptized, apparently the amount of days later that would have made that make sense. But we have no actual recording of his date of birth as positively this date. But we have the year and the month. We do not have that about Anne Boleyn. And even though she wasn't a queen at birth, she was still the daughter of two semi-important people. Of pretty well-off line of people, not like top tier, but But in those days, I guess that wasn't important. But the fact that there are things that we don't know about her is somewhat attributable to the fact that, besides the fact that they didn't keep as good records back then, but after she was executed, it seems that there was a lot of discarding of her memory. I don't know how much of it was done on purpose, or some of it was just the way things were, but there was not a lot of record of her existence in Henry's things, which is crazy, right? Because I mean, just obliterated, as it were. Of course, other people were communicating over the years of her before and after she died, and so we have some records of things, letters from ambassadors, that sort of thing. They may have been a bit opinionated, but there you go. So you may argue, but well, sure, maybe Henry just wanted to not think about her anymore, but you would think that maybe her daughter would have wanted to restore her memory and defend her. And I don't think that Elizabeth would have said anything bad about her mother, but I don't think she brought as much attention to being her mother's daughter. She was probably a little more emphasizing of being Henry VIII's daughter, a Tudor queen, because there were accusations that Anne had slept with numerous people and may not have had Elizabeth from Henry, may have been someone else's daughter. So her only real right to be the queen would have been being Henry's daughter, so she may have more emphasized that relationship, however her personal feelings were. So even though Anne would not have tried to get rid of her memory, she probably wasn't on a massive campaign to, restore my mother, But, so that leaves historians of now and, subsequent centuries to have formed opinions, to have gleaned what they could about Anne over the years. And I'm not obsessed with Anne Boleyn, I have to say. She's an interesting character to me. I don't think I would have ever been her best friend, but I do find her fascinating, as most people who are into history tend to do. And people just seem to be, a lot of people anyway, seem to be attracted to the Tudor era. It just is an interesting time period, so it's a very popular thing to write about, like World War II, I guess. So, I have over the years I have read a lot of books about Anne Boleyn, or just about the life of the Tudor times, and she would have come in that at different times, and historical novels. And I'm looking to pick up Brief Gaudy Hour by Margaret Campbell Barnes. I don't know if I read this. I have records of my reading, but there are some things that I misplaced recently, so until I find them, I don't know if I definitely read this book. I definitely haven't read it the past 10 years, because I have a good record of my past 10 years reading. But if I'm reading it and it seems familiar, well, there it goes. But that's okay. Rereading is fine too. I may pick this up soon. I want to. I'm wanting to read a little bit of history right now, even historical novels. But this seems to be favorable toward Anne. So, and that's good. But when I say I'm of two minds, it is something that I don't really like about myself, is that with people like Anne Boleyn, sometimes I'm influenced by the person's perspective who's writing. Whether it's someone writing from the perspective of one of Anne's enemies, like Catherine Aragon, right, the first wife of Henry VIII, or her daughter Mary, or any number of people who were opposed to Anne Boleyn. If I'm reading from their point of view, of course, Anne was going to be viewed. Forget the fact that Henry was the one who had the power. Anne was going to be viewed as the homewrecker, the evil woman who came from years of living in France to be a seductress, full of ambition, would do anything to hold on to the crown and do anything to make sure her daughter was the next heir, or would do anything to have an heir that was a son, including sleeping with other people. All kinds of stuff like that. And there are books like that that are very popular, that are novels, such as the other Boleyn Girl, that was very popular, very interesting. I read the book, and I saw the film as well, and yeah, if you saw something like that, you may you may find Anne interesting, but you do not find her as a complete innocent sweetheart. I don't think anyone really thinks of her as a complete sweetheart, but as someone who committed a crime worthy of execution, recent historians don't usually tend to think toward that direction anymore. And now there are many societies and people, like with Richard III, who come to Anne's defense so strongly. If I were to sit here right now and come up with my own opinion of her, not having read much about her recently, I would say that she may have had her negative points. I probably wouldn't have done some of the things she did, and she may have over pushed her opinions or said things she shouldn't have said at the wrong times, had temper tantrums at the wrong times. But I really think that she was not guilty of the crimes that she was executed for, as was other men who were accused of having been with her. I do think that that entire execution, everything that went through it, was generated by Henry's desire to get rid of her and Thomas Cromwell being very thorough. Even though after reading those Cromwellian books by Hilary Mantel, I really found him fascinating, I do know that he was also a man of the Tudor times that would have done anything to survive, and that did not always mean being kind and being fair at all. I do think that it is interesting how many women come out during that time strong-minded. I mean, when you think about how Anne was so vilified as like a wicked stepmother type, or to Mary, Catherine's daughter, and yet you also see how stubborn Mary was for her mother's rights, and you know that probably Anne wasn't in charge of the treatment of Mary. It was a reaction probably from the king because he wasn't getting the loyalty he wanted. But it's so interesting to see people who were so willing to stand firm in their own beliefs until maybe threat of death. It wasn't until a while later that Mary actually signed away her her opinions, So yes, you can say that there were strong women during that time for sure. I mean, and Anne's daughter Elizabeth was certainly an example of that. But they weren't very powerful either. So it's hard to blame Anne for things that were done, whether they were done in her name or not. It was really Henry who had the power, and his reactions to things, which is what fueled things. So yeah, but I just, like I said, I have found myself mostly, if I was going to, sit on a court right now and vote not guilty, I would do so for Anne. Does that mean I like her as a person? Not 100%. But I just don't like the feeling that when I read books about her, sometimes my opinion gets colored by how that person feels. Sometimes I get annoyed by people who are too strongly in her defense, if that makes sense. There was a book, and I wish I would have kept a record of it, and if I ever find it again, I am definitely going to pick it up just because it was interesting. Someone who was related to her or descended from her family, and they were just so, she could do no wrong. She could absolutely do no wrong. And I don't believe that per se, but I do believe that her being made out to be the home-wrecking, wicked witch person, I just don't think so. The only thing I could say about her being any kind of influence is how did Henry wait so long to marry her and not just give up and just say, well, look, I want a son, and I'm going to find a better way of doing it. Why was it that he was so intent on marrying her for so many years before he actually was able to do so? That is something else. Maybe it was just his own stubbornness. Maybe he just thought that I want her and I don't want to be someone who is seen as having to back down from anything. I don't know. I do believe that Henry might have had some interesting points. He's fascinating as a person, and there are probably some good things about him, but I don't think you cannot make him into a good person to me, no matter what you write about him. But I do think that Anne has been, it was terrible what happened to her in the long run, and I can't imagine what it must have been like for her. I think she was brought to the Tower on the 2nd of May, and then she was executed on the 19th. So that's just over 2 weeks. But can you imagine what it must have been like at that time? Really? I mean, what kind of future she could have imagined for us? Did she ever think that she would have been in a position to have been executed at all? Was that even thought of as a possibility in the past? And was there anything she could have done differently to avoid that? I don't know. So, yeah, when I say I'm of two minds, I don't want to come across as wishy-washy, because I would rather be able to form my own opinions. And I think in the long run, my own opinions stay kind of in one place. But I do find that sometimes in the heat of the moment, or in the flush of reading a book, especially if it's well written, if it's just all over the place, then I probably wouldn't be swayed by it very much. But when it's a really good argument, whether it's right or not, it can be hard. It can be hard to suddenly keep to one opinion. Like I said, if it's a historical novel that's about one of her enemies, as it were, yeah, you're going to feel somewhat not a fan of hers at that time. So, what do you guys think? Are you at all a fan of Anne Boleyn's? Are you interested in her life at all? And if you know anything about her, what are your thoughts on her? Do you think that she had anything about her to blame in her own demise? Not so much in her execution, but in her downfall. Do you think that she did anything that should have made her guilty at all? Or were there any mistakes that she made at all? Some say that when Henry got injured earlier in 1536 in a jousting accident and was unconscious for a couple of hours, it was said that she and her family were maybe planning for what would happen after he died, and that in itself, just even discussing the king's death, was considered, oh no. There were things that she said that were like, that they say that she talked about him being unable to do certain marital things, or at least being able to do them well. So was that something that she said, or if she said it, was that wise of her? So I will leave that up to you now. If you've read anything about her, seen any documentaries or any films, TV shows about her, a lot of them are embellished, let's face it, but they can be very entertaining. So let me know in the comments down below what you think. If you think I should keep going with this Tea and History Two Minds segment, please let me know, or is it just a lot of conversation about nothing? And yeah, please keep being interested in history if possible, because it's a fascinating subject. If I do keep on with this segment, I'm thinking of the next subject being Thomas Jefferson, because he brings up a lot of thoughts in my head, but I'd like to maybe do a little more reading up on him, because it's been a while for me, even longer than Anne, I think. So this is Catherine with Taking Tea and Catherine. Yes, Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and history filled day.